Hey, welcome everybody. It's been a minute, hasn't it? Welcome. I know that we're going to probably have a lot of folks who are coming a little later on into the stream because I have this fantastic habit, even when I'm healthy, of not really pre scheduling these things. So apologies for that. But I am excited to be here. It is exciting to be with brothers and sisters in Yeshua. It is exciting to be here and being hopeful in times of uncertainty, in times of, frankly, just crazy, in times of what would be global turmoil if we didn't know the truth, right? I'm going to go ahead and post on the community page that we are live now and put the link down here. That way people know that we're live. We have a couple of things to talk about. It's good to see you. So the COVID wise, yeah, I think that most of what I was having going on last week was I was feeling really, really run down last week. And I was thinking that, I was just between my heart stuff and, my ACL tear and all that good stuff that maybe I was just feeling really run down. I think it kind of came to a head Friday. I was at work. I literally had not done much, but I was drenched through my shirt, couldn't stop sweating, was starting to lose my taste and smell. And then, I think that's kind of what happened. So I had 3 really hard days after already kind of a hard week last week. Really feel like I got steamrolled by a bus. And then after that, thankfully with all you guys and your prayers and serving a God who is our only healer and our only provider, feeling much, much better now. So definitely appreciate it. If you guys can be praying for my girls, they are feeling a little under the weather. So hopefully they have not caught it as well. So far, it looks like it's just a bug, but we're praying that it stays that way. They've all got unnaturally good immune systems, whereas I, between all my different health complications, am like, kind of considered immunocompromised at this point between my heart and all this stuff. And so that's what's been going on. So if you didn't know, I've been gone for a while, almost a whole month, I think. And then it kind of on and off before. So I just want to give a really brief recap of all the things that have happened over the summer. So I ended up tearing my ACL on May 8th. Initially, I went in there for imaging. One doctor diagnosed ACL. One doctor diagnosed just a knee sprain. After getting a letter in the mail, though, from workers' comp, they addressed that, hey, this is an ACL tear. So I am wearing 2 braces right now, just so that I can walk around. One is a really thick compression sleeve. One of them is a brace meant for support. So between the 2 braces, I can get around decently okay. The pain is still there. The swelling is still there. After that, I ended up getting hospitalized for 4 days in the cardiovascular ICU. That's where you guys saw me with hanging out with bro Tyler. That was pretty scary. At one point, I had to carry around nitroglycerin tablets to make sure I wasn't having a heart attack at any given point. Diagnosed with chronic pericarditis, which wasn't great. But after about, I think, we're close to about a month and some change now of medicine, been doing much better with the medicine. Obviously, I don't look like I'm dying. I'm not going to pass out midstream like I was worried about the last time we hung out together. And that is great. And then, ended up having to transition out of my job at the school. Unfortunately, with work-related injuries and everything, it's kind of like playing hardball. And so they didn't want to give me a surgery. So they wanted to move me into an upper, like a higher risk classroom, basically. I worked there for about 4 days after I got back from my grandmother's funeral service. And, I had this kid get kind of, I was a sped teacher. And so I had a kid have a little bit of a meltdown. Understandably, new environment and everything. He hit me really hard in the knee. And after that, it was like, hey, I'm not going to be able to be in an environment where I've got to worry about these lovely, awesome kids beating my knee in right now. So it was one of those things where it was like, hey, you can resign or you can leave. So I was able to talk with my lawyer about it and say, look, I'm going to leave because of medical situations not being resolved. And so that's where I'm at now. I am trying to serve tables when I'm not catching COVID at the moment on a busted knee. That's hard. So I covet your prayers, just that I'm able to be held together while we are in this transitionary period. So that's what's been going on. And if you guys didn't remember, my grandmother passed away in June. And then at the beginning of August, I was blessed in being able to go out there and share the gospel at her funeral and, celebration of life, and talking about Jesus and trying to honor her last request. She wanted me to sing a song. I wasn't able to do that without getting super emotional. So I was able to basically share the last day of her life and how the Lord orchestrated it, and was able to express the need for Jesus. So that was a blessing. So that is what has been going on. So it's been a lot, and I'm happy to be back with you all now. So that's been crazy. And then I was a little worried about pancreatitis because I've had liver and kidney issues. And then, we were worried about when I was in the hospital, they also were concerned about pancreas stuff. So that's what we were doing. That's why I was worried it was pancreatitis. Thankfully, it's not. But yeah, so it looks like I'm over the hump in terms of, and forgive me guys for not looking at the camera. I forgot to open up my notes, and I'm trying to do that right now while we're on stream. But thankfully, it feels like I'm over the hump with that, which is great because honestly, man, that was getting brutal. I mean, it just was getting absolutely brutal. So thanks for your prayers. A lot of the COVID stuff exacerbated some of my heart issues. So I am having a day today where it's a little bit, not nearly as bad as it was, but it is a little bit exacerbated. So, please pray for me there. So we have some things to talk about. A lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is referring to the stuff in the Middle East right now with Israel and Hamas, and a lot of exterior pressure from like the States and from other countries in the West, really pushing Israel to accept a borderline plea for the end of the war type deal, right? The ceasefire deal. And so what's been happening is that and this is kind of what the U.S. has been doing. They're like, well, we're going to send all of our helicarriers, all of our cruisers, all of our planes over to the Middle East. That's going to serve as two things, right? And I want to make sure that we're being really, really clear on it. The two things are, it is both a deterrent from Iran trying to attack Israel. It is also the U.S. basically telling Israel, do not attack, which I think is ridiculous because what that does is it supersedes another nation's sovereignty. That's utter garbage, in my opinion, especially when that other sovereign nation is God's chosen nation. I think that's a very silly place to be. So everyone is pressuring Israel. It's not just the U.S. It's all the leaders in the West. It's this garbage out of the UN. And what we're seeing is there's a lot of, I call it external pressure because a lot of it is not coming from within Israel. Within Israel, they're very much in self-preservation mode, which is understandable when you think about the fact that they have been assaulted, bombed, murdered, hostages taken, all of these things. I think that as we get closer, if we're still here in October, as we get closer to the October 7th, 1 year, I'll call it a memorial, not an anniversary, because we're remembering the victims of that day. I think we're going to see a lot more action if we're still here that long. We'll see. Personally, I think that there is so much going on right now, guys, that I am not going to, how do I say this? I'm not going to try to pin it on a date or a season or a feast or anything. I literally think that we could be going up at any moment now. So if you hear me talking about soon, I literally just mean that, hey, I think it's going to be so soon that I'm going to talk every day like Jesus could come back today, because I think that's where we're at on the timeline. So check out Isaiah. Look at the prophecies of Elam. We are going to be doing a video about all of the prophecies concerning like Elam and concerning Israel. I wanted to do that a couple of days ago, but then I ended up getting really sick. So I want to do a video that's an hour and some change to where we can talk about all these things. And because what's happening, guys, is that at least in the Western church, there is this satanic push to really kind of supersede the word of God, to undermine the state of Israel. There are people who think that Israel is not God's nation, that the Jews have no place in God's plan. And it's not true. It unfortunately stems from arrogance and biblical illiteracy. And so when we get to that video, we'll talk more about that. But what I'm saying now is that when we're looking at even the state side with, with governments and pressures and all these things, what is happening is that Israel is really being bullied into submission, unfortunately. And Israel has this pattern of trying to go the way of men and man's wisdom instead of leaning into what God says their rights are and what they can do. namely self-defense and self-governance and that kind of thing. So what's happening is they're trying to make a deal with men in order to provide them a false sense of security. Now, that does sound familiar because we know that eventually we're going to hear cries for peace and security, or peace and safety. And so this is kind of another foreshadowing of that. I think that as we get closer until the rapture, I think that we're going to be seeing more and more of these calls for peace and safety. The thing that's crazy is that we're going to be in a situation very soon where, unfortunately, anytime you deal with terrorists or stereotypical villains, whatever you want to call it, bad guys, giving into them only makes them want more. Case in point, I was thinking about this earlier, and I was kind of, asking the Holy Spirit what he wanted me to talk about. And one of the things I keep going back to is, like, when you look at, for example, World War II with Adolf Hitler, right? What was it? It was just give me Poland and I'll be happy. And so, there's papers and it's, peace, the war is over. And then what happens? Hitler starts invading other countries after they've already said, look at all the peace. It's the same thing. And so when you give terrorist organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like, frankly, Iran, because Iran is controlling all their proxies with the Houthis and everything else, they're going to want more. It's like if you feed yeast a little bit of sugar and you're making bread, right? If you keep feeding it, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's going to need more and more and more to sustain itself, right? This is what is happening. And unfortunately, in the West right now, the superpowers all have kind of really weak administrations. When we saw 4 years ago, love him or hate him, Trump had a decent foreign policy until it came to him trying to divide Israel. That was my thing that I really wish he wouldn't have done. When you saw that he was ousted from office, had a lot of bad stuff happen. That trend is normal. We saw it with both Bushes and everything else as well, and Clinton and all this other stuff, where as long as the people in the world are standing with Israel, good things happen. But as soon as they try to divide the land or give it away to the Palestinians or whomever, right, bad things start to happen. And so that was my one thing with, President Trump and his last administration, that I was like, dude, you were doing so well. Stop trying to divide what is properly and rightfully God's and Israel's. Leave it. So what's happening is that, this administration with President Biden, and with, Vice President Harris and Anthony Blinken, all this kind of this conglomerate of weakness, this conglomerate of just, frankly, satanically inspired garbage. I'll just say that, not the people themselves, but the platform, right? It is fueled by Satan. Make no mistake. It is satanic and evil and gross. We'll talk more about that in a minute. They have, from the get-go, been very much, if you are familiar with Orwell's works, like 1984, it's like doublespeak, right? Where you're saying one thing, but behind the scenes, you're really doing another thing. For example, we will always be Israel's ally, but we're going to position our troops in a way that we will forcibly make them not defend themselves. Right? That's doublespeak. That's textbook. Because what you're doing is you're saying one thing and meaning another. You've got President Biden coming out a couple weeks ago, and as recent as last week, saying, we will use whatever means necessary to defend Israel. And you're like, on paper, if you take someone at their word, you're like, that's great. If they need help, we're going to help them. And then what happens? They start to move in and try to intimidate them and bully them into standing down. Can you imagine if someone in another country came to the United States or came to your country when you're being assaulted by terrorists, when your women are being raped, your children are being beheaded and burned alive, and said, I know these people are doing these heinous, horrific things from the pit of hell, but don't worry, don't defend yourself. That's insane. Unfortunately, that's what's happening with the rest of the world in Israel. It is rightly becoming a cup of drunkenness, a cup of trembling. This country the size of New Jersey, all of a sudden, everyone's got an opinion on it. Ironically, when you look at the formation of Israel, really what did it was Truman helping to push the establishment of this country into the UN back in the 40s, right? The thing that's crazy is that no one wanted anything to do with it then. All of a sudden now, as the prophetic time clock has turned, just like God's word said, suddenly everyone wants a peace. And there's only so much to go around. Everyone is looking at Israel. Everyone is wanting some skin in the game when it comes to Israel. Is it a coincidence? Absolutely not. God said this was going to happen, and here we are. And so Anthony Blinken comes out today, and again, this is conjunction with the Democrat National Convention in Chicago today. There's a whole slew of issues there that we don't necessarily have to get into. But of course, on the heels of that, because everything is politically motivated in today's culture, it's, oh, look, we're about to have our convention for our socialist regime. By the way, Israel's agreed to new ceasefire terms. Okay, well, there's two concerns with that. Number one, did Hamas agree to terms? And number two, if they did agree to those terms, will they honor those terms? Absolutely not. More likely than not. And here's the thing. Everyone keeps talking about this return of hostages. This is the thought that terrifies me because it is lawless out there. It is lawless. Let's talk about it. Say Hamas agrees to these terms, right? We're going to give you your hostages back. We're going to stop attacking. And then what happens when they roll up with a truck full of bodies because they just kept dead corpses and there's no actual live hostages anymore? What happens then? At the very least, a major escalation militarily. Now, I don't think it's cynicism to suggest that terrorists probably murdered all the hostages. I think that likely there's not many, if any, alive. That's my gut feeling on this. So here's what's going to happen, potentially. We've all agreed to ceasefire terms, and all we need is our people back. Okay, no problem, but you didn't say they had to be alive. Here you go. Bunch of corpses. Could be defiled, could be whatever, right? What happens then? A major escalation. So as opposed to a potential deterring attack, really, because it's a deterrent. When Israel goes and attacks Iran, when Israel goes and attacks these different countries, it is a deterrent. It is designed to deter future aggression, right? You remove the opportunity for that. You put them in this really, frankly, kind of sucky position where they have to accept a bad deal. And then what happens? They get one pulled over on them. And instead of being in a position where it was going to be something smaller, now it's a major escalation. Thinking ahead, you have to wonder if that's not part of the plan geopolitically to frame them as these monsters, these villains. Because here's the thing. October 7th comes around, slaughtered, thousands, slaughtered, kidnapped. I mean, some of the footage from last year is disgusting. With how they sexually violated women and children. They would make families watch each other be torn apart. It's horrible. And yet, why in the world, with this footage existing and this footage being put to the UN, this footage being shown globally, Israel is still the bad guy today? They're bombing civilians, but they're not. When you look at Hamas, when you look at Hezbollah, they set up terrorist bases in residential areas and they use them as meat shields. And it's unfortunate, but here's the thing. If Israel doesn't attack those terrorist bases, unfortunately, in the midst of residential areas, because these scumbag terrorists are putting them there, their women and children are at risk again, and that's not worth it to them. So they're going to attack. But before they do, the only country in the world that will drop leaflets saying, hey, look, this is the situation. You've got X amount of terrorists here. We don't want to kill any civilians if we don't have to. Please leave. Show me another nation in the world that does that militarily, and I'll shut up. You're not going to find many. So this whole narrative that Israel is just this genocidal cult, and it's horse manure from the pit of hell. And I want to say something very clearly. When Jesus refers to the Pharisees, because they say the Pharisees come up and they tell them in the Gospels, you're with Satan. You're filled with demons, whatever. Jesus says, look, a house divided itself it can't stand. So if Satan is against Satan, his house is going to fall. I'm going to say something flat out. Okay. If everyone is saying it, probably not great. Probably not a great position to be on. If it's this mass groupthink phenomenon that we see in our culture now, and everyone's saying it and they're just repeating the same garbage, probably Satan, frankly. Why? Because if it wasn't, you'd know. Why? Because a house divided against itself can't fall. So if this is the narrative in every major media outlet, every major secular source, every major satanic-filled political group out of the mouths of the terrorists, whatever, you know that the guy behind it is literally Lucifer. The problem is, too, is that we're seeing this as a global thing. And so in the UK, there's riots, right? what's happening is that, we're seeing these riots in the UK, and what's happening is that these people are like, oh, the Muslims are burning down the UK. That's crazy. Protect the mosques. What? The guys from the mosques are the people that are burning your country down. This doesn't make any sense. So now what's happening is that people are speaking out against it because it's satanic and frankly kind of stupid. And so the UK is even at the point where they're like, hey, if you keep talking trash about it, we'll try to find a way to get you guys in trouble, even if you're not in our country. Even if you're not a citizen of the UK, hey, we'll try to arrest you. We'll try to do something, even if you're in your home country. Utterly absurd. Utterly absurd. And yet, the mystery of lawlessness. Matthew 24, man, the first thing that Jesus says is, take careful heed that no one deceive you. All of a sudden, Ukraine went from grifting billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars to now they're invading Russia and doing really well. Kabuki theater, man. I'm sorry. I think it is. I think it's very silly. I think that it's not a coincidence that we're watching things shake up so geopolitically at this time. Now, could it be that the Ukraine thing is a genuine turn and maybe the billions of dollars are actually becoming useful? Could be. Could be. Could it be that this is just the way that God is orchestrating, Gog and Magog? Could be, man. Could be. But I would just say, keep careful watch and keep your eyes open and don't be deceived. If the masses are shouting it loudly, it's probably not a good message. I don't mean to sound cynical, but I believe that this needs to be said. I think that if the satanic-filled masses, the people who are apart from Christ, are shouting the same thing in unison, you probably should avoid getting caught up in it, frankly. Revolutionary thought, I know, but it stands. Why? A house divided against itself isn't going to stand, man. So Satan is not going to go against himself. His demons, his cronies, his messengers, his principalities, all these things, they're not going to go against the head red honcho, right? So if everyone is shouting that, I would just say, look, exercise extreme discernment. What's crazy, if you guys didn't see it at the DNC tonight, they've got a Catholic priest, and that's a whole other can of worms we don't have to get into, opening in prayer, and he says, we praise you, O God of all creation, quicken us with a resolve to protect your handiwork. You are the source of every blessing that graces our lives and our nation. He's praying this as they have the sacrament of abortion outside for their demonic cult. God of all creation, including the unborn in the womb, quicken us with resolve to protect your handiwork as they're murdering children outside. The disgusting thing is watching people bow their heads in agreement with this, while again, they know for a fact that part of the programming for the DNC is free abortions outside. By the way, it's Chicago, so it's late-term abortions. You're 9-month-old in your belly, you're about to give birth to you. Sorry. Kids are getting murdered out there. And yet, they make a mockery of our Lord, and it's shocking. And they're crying and all these things. They're getting so emotional while hundreds, if not thousands of kids are being slaughtered out there in their vans. This is what's at stake. This is why the earth is, the church is called to be salt and light on the earth. I'm going to have another video later this week talking about my personal views on what we can do stateside in our own countries while we wait for the Lord to return. But for now, let's go back to the Middle East. Lebanon keeps getting hit in their ammunition and weapons warehouses. Okay. They're in a state of disarray right now. So we're talking about the fact that the Air Force destroyed one of Hezbollah's secret sites in Nabi, in Baalbek. The attack was deep into Lebanon at a distance of over 100 kilometers from the Israeli border. So Israel is still preemptively striking Lebanon deep inside of the country. Why? Because they want to, before they make a major move against Hezbollah, they want to be able to go and take out as much of their terrorist infrastructure as they can. Also, I want to say something ironic real quick. The Democratic Party has been screaming what a racist Orange Man is for building a border wall. And the funniest thing in the world, they have a border wall at the DNC in Chicago, which their leftist terrorist protesters took down. How great is that? Love the irony. Iran to the UN today. There are allegations of Iranian interference in the U.S. presidential election, saying that they're baseless. And they're also saying the U.S. government must provide support and evidence to its allegations, and then we'll respond. So now there's rumors that Iran is trying to interfere in the elections. You don't know what to believe anymore because, frankly, you're having a hard time making heads or tails of anything. We know that when you look at like the Mueller report with all the Russia collusion garbage, that simply wasn't true. Objectively, it wasn't true. Love Donald, hate Donald, doesn't matter. Objectively, that thing came out as not true. So now they're trying to run it back and say there's interference. There's talk of a monkeypox outbreak. It's garbage. It's hard to know what's real. So will we see a case of election disease coming around? Perhaps. Could be. We'll see. But there is a lot going on just in the Middle East that makes us, really look up. I mean, really look up. Because again, family, the problem is not that these things are happening. It's that they're happening in closer and closer together. There's an increase in frequency. So I want to give a shout out to Bubba. I'm going to read a little excerpt from Bubba News tonight. Tonight, Israel gave Hezbollah a warning. If you try to attack Israel again, we will respond with a response that will destroy Beirut and all of Lebanon. So, I mean, that's what's going on now. So again, we're seeing that, there's not much faith in a temporary ceasefire truce anyway. So now, Netanyahu is saying that even if there is a truce in place, within weeks it'll crumble. So it's like everyone is so ramped up that like it's almost like they're doing it for appearances at this point. But no one is actually doing anything of substance in any government because they're all just greedy and selfish and garbage. I mean, I hate to say it. It's like if you can find a unicorn, you can find an honest politician. I mean, this is the thing is that with America pressuring them, it's all for the sake of the election. The Democrats who are in power now, they want to look like they have as much girth and good things. And even though the country is falling apart and no one can afford groceries and we're taking out loans for bread and water, they're like, but look, peace in the Middle East. Not until Jesus comes. Everything else before that is going to be a false peace. When you look at, other countries like the UK, they are just nuts. They have no desire for truth. They have no desire for anything other than control and crazy. Go for it, man. Have fun as your country burns down and you try to insulate the terrorists who are burning your country down. Good luck with all that. That's crazy. It's pretty wild. They're waiting for Hamas's response to all of the peace talk deals, which again, are they going to accept it? And if they do, is it going to be legit? Probably not. IDF is holding a day of readiness summit on the northern front amid the threats from Iran. Crazy. So Israel has also been doing things like showing their refueling capabilities and all these military drills. They're trying to send a message that they are ready to defend themselves at all costs. That's what they're trying to do. That whatever the circumstance, they're going to be able to defend themselves. So that's good. They're not shocked that it's going to fall apart. They're not shocked that it's going to, really, frankly, go to hell. I mean, that's just the reality of it because Satan is behind it. I can make a word joke there and a pun and be okay. But again, this is the type of thing. And it's just all garbage behind closed doors. Yeah. I mean, Gene, the DNC, you have to really look for it. I mean, it's crazy. And what's crazy is that, it's bad when even CNN is saying, this platform they're running on isn't even the Democrats' platform anymore. Like it's something way worse. That happened today. There was an interview with, Jake Tapper. And if you guys know him, he's a flaming leftist. And even he's like, this is pretty extreme. So, I mean, what's going to happen? We'll see. Are we going to see something with, socialist regime? Maybe, probably. I don't know. We'll see. My hope is no. I will fight to where, at least in my part, I will be a Daniel in Babylon and I will fight for truth. I will fight for, biblical values. That's my hope is that no, that it has a little bit of a turnaround. But here's the thing. When you look at the Bible, even if there is a turnaround in this country, the momentum globally is still going towards the return of Christ. That is my heart. Until he gets here, though, I'll be preparing for what's coming and fighting for truth and justice and biblical values. So, what are we going to do? It's been a minute since we've had one of these where we've had all the news, at least some of the news, because there's so much, right? What do we do? I appreciate that no one is panicking and freaking out in the comments because we know we've read the book, right? But here's the thing. I want us to be very intentional. I don't want us to just talk about having faith. I want us to actually have faith. I don't want us to talk about the things that we know we ought to do. I want us to actually do those things. So what does that look like? What it looks like is, frankly, sharing the gospel with fervency and intensity. Guys, you understand that prophecy is one of the greatest gifts that God has given us because we're able to look at current events and point back to history written in advance thousands of years ago. For the skeptic, that is a great technique. Now, there are going to be scoffers and mockers in abundance. But there are so many people out there, guys, who are just scared and need some good news. You'd be shocked. There are a lot of people who are ready in their excitement and their well-meaning about this. In their well-meaning and excitedness to see Jesus, they almost write off the remaining population of the earth right now. But we're called to serve until he gets here. We're called to work until he comes, right? We're called to share the gospel until he gets here. And so there are a lot of people who are struggling, who are scared, who need some good news. The world is very similar to how it was in the first century church with a lot of crazy stuff going on, and people are ready to have some good news and some hope. So I don't want us to just say we're going to share the gospel. I want us to go out there and share the gospel. As you feel led, man, share the gospel. It could be that you're at an Arby's and someone's checking you out. It could be that you've got a long-lost friend the Lord is putting on your heart to reach out to. It could be you have an estranged family member that you haven't talked to, but the Lord's putting it on your heart. I know with my wife and I, it was when we moved back out here, we wanted to be really intentional and share the gospel with my father-in-law, my brother-in-laws, my sister-in-law, and their families. All have scoffed and mocked us. All of them think we're idiots. And that I can't control that. But what I can control is that God has called me to share, even in the midst of mockers and scoffers. I can tell you that when I lived here 4.5 years ago, forgive me, it's 5 years now. When I lived here 5 years ago, I did not really share with them. My faith was not in a great place. I was in infancy when I should have been in adolescence in my faith, frankly. When we moved back here, though, we made the decision to be intentional with our faith and to share with them. They have mocked and ridiculed and scoffed and spat, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. They're allowed to do that. It is a bad choice, but God has given them autonomy and individual sovereignty in their decision-making. But we're called to be faithful and to share regardless. Okay? So do that as the Lord leads you, okay? We will be finishing up the tail end of our Book of Revelation series and our 2 Thessalonians series. We are also going to be, doing more stuff. I think what's going to have to happen, guys, just with time and everything, the Bible studies that are in-depth are probably going to have to be pre-recorded. But when we do live streams, we'll be together like this, okay? So listen, go out there, share the gospel. It's been a minute, so do me a favor. I've been out of the YouTube algorithm for a while, so if you can like, share, all the stuff. Make sure you guys are still subscribed because there was a lot of people that commented on my stuff saying, hey, we're unsubscribed for some reason. It's been happening with a lot of the other watchmen. Do me a favor and just go ahead and, go ahead and just do all those things for me. It helps me out. But most importantly, guys, look up and don't fear and hold on tightly to your Bibles because here's the thing, guys. There's so much misinformation going around. The only correct information that we have is what God sent us. And then we use that to discern everything else. All right. So look into his perfect word. It's a guide to the blind, man. It's a light in the darkness. Cling to it. All right. The Lord Christ is sovereign. He is still on the throne. He is still coming soon. And we need to be working in our master's field until he comes and gets us. I don't want to be counted a wicked or lazy servant. I want to be counted as a well done, good and faithful servant. And guys, I will be the first to tell you, I'm a screw up apart from Christ. I'm just a dude, and I'm apart from Christ. I've got nothing good within me. But as he fills me and he leads me closer to himself, man, all I want to do is hear well done from him because I love him so much, and he loves me so much, and I just want to make my Heavenly Father proud. All right? So God bless you guys. I love you. It's great to see you. All right. We'll try to get a video schedule going, and I can't wait to talk more. All right. God bless you guys. Thank you for all your prayers. It's been great. Please continue to pray for my family as we're going through all this stuff. And thank you truly from the bottom of my heart. It was great to see you guys tonight. God bless y'all. Good night.